dead silent. Every single reporter in that building stopped breathing for just a second, because the man sitting at that table, the man who had said absolutely nothing for weeks, opened his mouth and said 4 words that nobody was ready for. I was there that night. Cameras flashed, pens dropped. Someone in the back of the room actually gasped out loud. For weeks, this man had hidden behind lawyers. He had refused every single interview. He would not answer one police question, not one. He invoked the Fifth Amendment and went completely radio silent while an 84-year-old grandmother, a woman he was supposed to protect, was missing from her own home. And now, here he was, finally talking. But here is the part that nobody saw coming. Right after he said those words, right after the room erupted, he leaned back toward the microphone and said something else. Something that stopped every single person cold. She was not alone. Wait, what? If Nancy was not alone that night, then who else was inside that house? Because up until that moment, everybody believed this story was about one man and one missing woman. But those 3 words just blew the entire case wide open. And what investigators discovered after that statement, the evidence they found buried in the desert, the audio they recovered from inside the house, and the identity of the second person, is something you are absolutely not prepared for. Stay right here, because this story is far from over. Let us go back to the beginning, because before we talk about suspects and evidence and desert searches, you need to understand who Nancy Guthrie actually is. Nancy is 84 years old. She is not some stranger you read about in a headline. She is somebody's mother, somebody's grandmother. She is the kind of woman who baked cookies for her grandchildren and showed up early to church every single Sunday without fail. She spent her career as a university administrator. She worked hard. She built a life. She raised 5 children. And when her husband passed, she kept going because that is the kind of woman she is. Strong, quiet, steady. She had a pacemaker because her heart needed a little help keeping rhythm. But her spirit never needed any help at all. She lived in Tucson, Arizona, in a neat, peaceful neighborhood. She knew it. It was her routine. Her safety knew it. It was her routine. Her safety. Her habit. On the night of February 1st, 2026, that light went dark, and so did everything else. February 1st started like any other day for Nancy. But by the time the sun went down over Tucson, something had shifted inside that house, and something that would change her family forever. At 7:12 in the evening, a food delivery arrived at Nancy's front door. 2 meals, not 1. 2. That small detail matters more than it might seem. The order came from her son-in-law's account, Tommaso Cion. He was already there that evening. Neighbors saw his car parked in the driveway around 6:30. Phone data later confirmed it. He was inside that house, and dinner was not an accident. Dinner was planned. The delivery driver later told investigators that when the door opened, the man on the other side looked tense. Tight jaw, distracted, and somewhere in the background a woman's voice could be heard talking. Not yelling, just talking. But something about the whole thing felt off to him. He mentioned it to his girlfriend that night. He said it just felt strange. At 7:40, Nancy's home phone made a call to her lawyer's office. It went to voicemail. Forensic experts later recovered a partial message. The words they could make out were short, but they carried weight. Important change, not comfortable. Tomorrow. Was she talking about her will? Her finances? About Tommaso? Investigators believe all 3. Because here is what most people did not know at the time. Nancy had a meeting scheduled with her attorney on February 3rd, 2 days away. She was planning to make changes to her legal documents. The changes that would reduce Tommaso's financial control, pull back the power of attorney he had been holding over her affairs. And Tommaso knew that meeting was coming. Now, pay close attention here, because what happened between 8:42 and 9:03 that night is the center of this entire case. At 8:20, neighbors reported hearing raised voices coming from inside Nancy's home. Not screaming, but noticeably louder than normal. Nancy was known as a calm, soft-spoken woman. Raised voices were unusual for her. Then, at 8:31, Tommaso received a phone call, 14 seconds long. The number was not saved in his contacts. Investigators traced it. It came from a prepaid phone, the kind you pay cash for at a gas station. That phone had been purchased just 3 days before February 1st. 14 seconds. That is just enough time to say something short, something simple, something like, "Are you ready?" Or, "It is time." Or, "What do you need me to do?" And we still do not know what was said. But what happened right after that call tells us everything. At 8:42 in the evening, Nancy's pacemaker recorded something alarming. Her heart rhythm changed suddenly. Not slowly, not naturally, suddenly, like someone frightened, like someone in pain. 5 minutes later, at 8:47, the device recorded sharp physical movement. Not walking, not sitting down. Sharp movement, like her body shifted fast. At 8:52, the pacemaker recorded what doctors call an acute cardiac event. Her heart was in serious trouble. And at 9:03 in the evening, the pacemaker signal stopped entirely. Not because the battery died, not because the device malfunctioned, because someone removed it. 11 minutes, from the first spike of distress to silence. 11 minutes and nobody called 911. Nobody called an ambulance. Nobody called for help. Instead, something else happened. Here is something that did not make big headlines early on, but investigators found it deeply troubling from the very beginning. There was no forced entry. None. The doors were not kicked in. The windows were not broken. The locks were not damaged. Whoever was inside that house that night was let in, welcomed in, trusted. Nancy's small dog was found inside the house the next morning. Calm. Not hiding under a bed. Not shaking in a corner. Dogs bark at strangers. They growl. They pace. Like they alert. But they do not always bark at family. Neighbors said the dog had been barking around 8:45 that evening and then stopped. Suddenly. Quickly. As if someone it recognized had quietly told it to settle down. That detail is small, but it keeps coming back. Then there was the garage door. Days before Nancy disappeared, the garage door had been lowered to a very specific angle. Not fully closed, just low enough to block the driveway security camera from capturing a clear view. When Tommaso was asked about it early on, he said it was to keep the sun out. But detectives found that answer hard to accept. Because later, when cameras were physically destroyed, it became clear that whoever destroyed them already knew where every single one was located. They had already thought about visibility. They had already considered what could and could not be seen. And there is one more thing. At 9:34 in the evening, during the time between the pacemaker going silent and the SUV leaving the driveway, Nancy's home Wi-Fi recorded a login to the security system. The correct password was entered. The cameras were disabled remotely before being physically damaged. Whoever did that knew the password. And Nancy was not someone who shared passwords freely. When police first began asking questions, Tommaso did something that the entire country noticed. He hired a lawyer. He said nothing. He declined every interview, ignored every reporter, and refused to cooperate with investigators. He invoked his Fifth Amendment right to remain silent and stayed there, locked behind that silence, for weeks. Now, some people say that is just a smart legal strategy. You do not talk to police without a lawyer. That is your right. But here is the thing. Savannah Guthrie, Nancy's daughter, one of the most recognizable faces on American television, stood in front of cameras with tears in her eyes and begged for her mother to come home. She made public pleas. The family offered a $100,000 reward. Savannah's brother and sister spoke out. They searched. They pushed. They did everything people do when someone they love goes missing. And Tommaso? Nothing. Not one word of support. Not one public statement. Not one appearance beside the family at any search event. A man who lived 15 minutes away from where this woman disappeared said absolutely nothing. One Tucson resident said it perfectly in an interview. "My gut is telling me it is the brother-in-law. You have not seen him. You have not heard from him." Radio silent. That is very suspicious to me. And that suspicion was building across the entire country. Then the FBI joined the case. Search warrants were signed. Phones, computers, and bank records were all pulled. A masked figure was caught on nearby security footage. Ransom notes appeared, but police quickly said those were likely scams. And still, Tommaso said nothing. Until that morning. Until that press conference. Until those 4 words. I was there that night. The cameras clicked like tiny hammers. Bright lights pointed straight at one man sitting at a long wooden table. His hands were folded in front of him. His lawyer sat close beside him. The room was quiet in a way that rooms rarely are anymore. A reporter cleared her throat. "Mr. Chion, do you have anything to say about Nancy Guthrie's disappearance?" Tommaso lifted his head slowly. His face looked tired. His eyes were red around the edges. He leaned toward the microphone. "Yes," he said. "I have something to say." More cameras flashed. Pens scratched across notebooks. The air inside that room felt heavy. "For weeks, people have believed I hurt Nancy." He paused. "I was there that night." Gasps. Real gasps. "I was there that night." Gasps. Real gasps from real people in that room. "I did go back to the house." A louder wave of murmurs spread across the room. He continued. He admitted there was an argument. He admitted Nancy had told him she was planning to make important changes. Changes to her will. Changes to the power of attorney. Changes that would take financial control away from him. He said he went back to talk. He said he did not go there to hurt her. And then he said the words that changed everything. She was not alone. The room froze a second time. Because now this was no longer a story about one person and a missing grandmother. Now there was someone else. 3 weeks before Tommaso spoke publicly, investigators had quietly received a full data report from Nancy's cardiologist. And what that report showed sent a chill through every detective working the case. At 8:42 p.m., her heart rhythm changed suddenly and severely. At 8:47 p.m., the device detected sharp physical movement. At 8:52 p.m., it recorded what doctors describe as acute distress. Her heart was in crisis, and at 9:03 p.m., the signal stopped completely because the device was physically removed from her body. Now, here is the thing about pacemakers that most people do not realize. Removing one is not simple. It is not something you do accidentally. It is not something you do to help someone. It takes deliberate physical force. It takes a decision. Doctors who reviewed the timeline said one thing very clearly. If someone truly wanted to help Nancy at 8:52 p.m. when her heart was in crisis, the one thing they should have done, the only logical thing, was call 911. Instead, the pacemaker was removed 11 minutes later. Not to help. Some investigators believe it was removed to erase the timeline. Because pacemakers record everything: time, rhythm, movement, distress. And once removed, the recording stops. If you want to create confusion about when something happened, removing that device achieves exactly that. That is not panic. That is a decision made under pressure. And pressure, as investigators were learning, had been building in this house for days. At 9:26 in the evening, Tommaso's phone sent a text message. It was short, just one word, sent to the prepaid phone number, and the same number that had called him earlier that night. The word was handled. Not accident, not help, not call me, handled. Investigators say that single word shifted the entire tone of the case, because handled does not sound like a man in panic. Handled sounds like a man wrapping something up, finalizing something, closing a chapter. When detectives later asked Tommaso about that text, his answer was simple. I do not remember. But here's what phone data remembers. At 9:22 p.m., motion was detected inside the garage, 46 seconds of movement. At 9:24, Tommaso's phone connected to his SUV's Bluetooth system. The car door likely opened. At 9:26, the text "handled" was sent. At 9:29, someone logged into Nancy's home security panel and placed it into maintenance mode, which stopped all automatic alerts from being sent to the monitoring company. That final action requires calm hands. It requires a password. It requires someone who is thinking clearly enough to cover every angle. And at 9:34 p.m., Nancy's backyard light, the one she left on every single night of her life, went dark. At 9:41, an SUV slowly pulled out of the driveway and moved quietly down the street. Not rushing, not panicking. Careful. At 10:07 that night, Tommaso's phone pinged a cell tower on the east side of Tucson, far from the neighborhood, near a stretch of open desert land, a place with almost no lights, very few homes, and almost no security cameras. His phone stopped moving for 9 minutes. 9 minutes parked in darkness. Investigators searched that area weeks later. They found tire impressions near a dirt path. They found traces of disturbed soil. But they did not find Nancy. Not yet. Then, 3 days after Tommaso's public statement, search teams came back, this time with cadaver dogs, drones, and ground-penetrating radar. Crime scene tape stretched across dry sand and desert brush. One of the dogs stopped suddenly. Its body went stiff. Then it sat down. That is how trained dogs signal something important. A second dog was brought in. Same spot, same response. 2 independent alerts. The team began digging carefully, every inch documented. About 2 feet down, they found fabric. Dark blue, thick. The same kind of moving blanket that fiber evidence from Nancy's garage had already pointed toward. No remains were inside. But the blanket linked the garage directly to this desert site. Then, 30 yards away, a small metallic object was pulled from the sand. Damaged, bent, dusty. A pacemaker casing. Serial numbers confirmed it. Nancy's medical device, removed from her body inside that house, had been carried out here and buried in the desert. The room back at headquarters went completely silent when that confirmation came through. Because now the evidence was not just digital. It was physical. It was in their hands. There is one detail in this case that makes everything feel very real, very human. At 8:58 p.m., during the time Nancy's heart was failing, her home smart speaker accidentally activated. Something triggered it. A sound, a voice, a movement nearby. The recording was only 4 seconds long. For weeks, the audio was too unclear to use. But forensic experts worked on it, cleaned it up, enhanced it layer by layer, and what they recovered made the grand jury go quiet. A woman's voice. One word, please. Then a loud thud, then silence. Just that one word, please. Was she asking for help? Was she asking someone to stop? Was she asking for someone else in the room to do something? Nobody knows for certain. But the timing matched the exact moment the pacemaker recorded her acute cardiac event. Prosecutors played that audio in the grand jury room. Some jurors lowered their heads. Because one word from one woman in 4 seconds made all the data and timelines and phone records suddenly feel like a real person, a real life, a real ending that nobody should have had. Tommaso has never publicly addressed that audio. His lawyer said it could mean anything, but investigators say the timing says everything. When detectives sat Tommaso down in that small gray room with the pacemaker casing on the table between them, something finally broke. Detective Morales slid the evidence bag forward without saying a word at first. Tommaso looked down at it. His jaw tightened. His breathing changed. For the first time since this entire case began, The calm disappeared from his face. She spoke quietly. "We found this in the desert." Silence. "No panic drives someone to a desert road," she continued. "No panic buries a blanket. No panic connects to a second vehicle." Tommaso stared at the table. His lawyer whispered something. He nodded once. Then he looked up. "I did not plan for her to die," he said. "Not. She did not die. Not. I did not hurt her. I did not plan for her to die." Those words, that specific construction. Investigators noted it immediately. "Who was with you?" the detective asked. Long pause. "There was someone else," he said. His lawyer tried to stop him. Tommaso kept talking. He said, after Nancy fell during the argument, he claimed she hit her head. He panicked. He said she was still breathing at that point. He said instead of calling 911, he called someone he trusted. A business associate. Someone who owed him. That person arrived later. He suggested staging the scene, destroying the cameras, removing the pacemaker to create confusion about the timeline, make it look like a break-in, he allegedly said. And so together, they moved her. But here's the part that stops you cold. Tommaso told detectives that Nancy stopped breathing in the garage, not in the hallway where the argument happened, not in the kitchen, in the garage, which means she may have still been alive when she was moved, when decisions were being made around her instead of for her, when someone was thinking about camera angles and security passwords instead of calling an ambulance. The prepaid phone, the masked figure, the Bluetooth connection to a second vehicle in the desert, the second set of cell tower pings near the house and near the desert site. All of it was pointing toward one thing. Tommaso did not do this alone. Investigators traced the store where the prepaid phone was purchased. Security footage showed a person in a baseball cap and sunglasses paying with cash. No ID. The person appeared slightly taller than Tommaso. Slim. Moved quickly. Could that be the masked figure seen near the house that night? Possibly. Could that be the person who arrived after the 14-second phone call? Almost certainly. At 10:12 p.m., during the 9-minute stop in the desert, Tommaso's phone briefly connected to a second Bluetooth device, not his own SUV. That connection lasted 18 seconds. Investigators believe another vehicle was present at that location, which means something or someone may have been transferred between those two vehicles. And the second phone, the prepaid one, it pinged a tower near that same desert area at 10:05 p.m. Two phones, two signals, one remote location, one dark night. Tommaso eventually told detectives the name of his associate during that interrogation. He claimed that after leaving the desert, he drove home and the other man took over. He says he does not know where Nancy was taken after that. An arrest warrant was issued for Tommaso for obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, and manslaughter. The second suspect is under active investigation. Detectives are not saying everything publicly yet, but they are close. Annie. Tommaso's wife and Nancy's own daughter had stood by him during those early weeks. She told close friends she believed him. She said he would never hurt her mother, but after his statement at that press conference, after he admitted destroying the cameras, removing the pacemaker, panicking instead of calling 911, she went quiet. Sources say after the statement she confronted him directly. She asked him one question. Who else was there? He did not give her a clear answer. And that silence inside the family may have been louder than any silence he kept publicly. Savannah Guthrie issued statements throughout this entire ordeal. Carefully worded, controlled. A journalist by profession, she knows how words land. She never directly accused Tommaso by name in public. But after the interrogation details leaked, her statement shifted in tone. "My mother deserves the full truth," she said. "We will not stop searching for her." Less hope in those words, more resolve. And the difference between a family searching and a family preparing for what might come next. That is still the question. For everything that has been uncovered, The pacemaker data, the desert blanket, the text message, the audio, the confession. Nancy Guthrie has not been found. Not yet. The desert site revealed the blanket and the device, but not her. Investigators believe she may have been moved a second time. The Bluetooth connection in the desert, the second vehicle, the associate who allegedly took over, all of it suggests the final location may be somewhere else entirely. Search teams are expanding. Ground-penetrating radar is being deployed in new areas. Traffic cameras near desert roads from the night of February 1st are being re-examined frame by frame. Financial records show that Nancy's account had unusual activity in the weeks before she disappeared. Tommaso had been moving money. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. Nancy had noticed. She had started asking questions. That may be the root of everything. The will meeting on February 3rd, the power of attorney about to change, the financial control about to slip away. People do terrible things when they feel like they are losing control. But here's something that should be said clearly. Nancy Guthrie is not a case number. She is not a statistic. She is not a mystery to be solved for entertainment. She is an 84-year-old grandmother who left a voicemail saying she was not comfortable, who said please into a dark room in the final moments of that night, who baked cookies and went to church and trusted the people around her. She deserves answers. Her family deserves closure. And every piece of evidence, every phone ping, every fiber of fabric, every second of that 4-second audio recording is a step toward both. As of right now, the case is moving toward prosecution. The grand jury continues to hear testimony. The second suspect is under active investigation. The desert search is ongoing. Tommaso broke his silence, but he did not tell the whole truth. Not yet. Because there is still one person out there who knows exactly what happened between 9:15 and 9:41 that night. One person who knows where Nancy is. One person who has been carrying that weight in silence, watching the news, watching the evidence close in, knowing the timeline is stacking against them. Silence never lasts forever. It cracked once already, and when it cracks again, the full truth will finally come out. If you know anything about Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, please contact the Tucson Police Department or submit an anonymous tip through their official website. You can remain anonymous.